One of the more popular spiritual writers, Catholic writers in our country is an Oblate of Mary Immaculate. That's Father Ronald Rolheiser. He's written many books and he writes articles in Catholic publications. And he's quite fond, I've read a lot of his books, he's quite fond of the word inchoate, which means not fully formed, incomplete, unrealized. And he says in many of his books that this is life. And there's always a temptation to make something in life the be-all and end-all for us, something transient that really is not that. Illustrate that a little bit more, I share with you a story from, not Franciscan, but a former Jesuit died, Father Anthony de Mello, wonderful spiritual, really genius in many ways, from India. And he tells the wonderful story of the devil walking along with a novice devil, and they see a man bend over and pick up something from the ground and put it in his pocket. The little devil says, "What was that he just picked up?" And the big devil says, "A piece of the truth." And the little devil says, "Doesn't that concern you?" And he says, "No, he'll just do what many others have done before him. He'll make a religious belief out of it." And de Mello went on to explain that a religious belief is a signpost that is pointing the way to the truth. People who cling tenaciously, though, to the signpost are prevented from moving towards the truth because they have a false feeling that they already possess it. In our first reading, the freed Hebrew slaves, our faith ancestors, are moving out of Egypt. They're moving toward the promised land. They're with Moses. They're in the wilderness. They're still very far away from the promised land, not so much in mileage, but in a state of mind. Understandably, they complain to Moses about being out there hungry and thirsty. Their old way of life in Egypt, even in slavery, was looking better and better. As you may have heard some people comment about people who've been in prison for a long time, they kind of come to prefer life on the inside than on the outside, where they call it 3 hots in a cot. It's that sense of longing for some stability, some certainty. This journey of faith for the people of Israel, it brought them many trials. They want to hold on to what they thought was true, and that truth for them was not a more abundant life, but a life that is drudgery, suffering, and then dying. At the time of Jesus, over 1,000 years after the Exodus events, the people following Jesus into the wilderness are hungry. But here in John's version, there are 4 versions, all 4 Gospels. It's one of the rare times they all have the same kind of account of feeding of many, many people, the feeding of the multitude. In John's version here, they're not out in the wilderness so much, they're in Capernaum. They're on the other side of the sea, and they follow Jesus there, but they are hungry still. Not physically as much as spiritually. The crowds following him, as you heard last week's gospel, he did that multiplication of the loaves, so they like these kind of signs. They're like magic tricks, and that's what they want again and again. Very similar to the people of Exodus, wanting to see some sign that God was still with them. These people are not, as I say, hungry necessarily physically, but spiritually. And they asked Jesus a good question. What can you do to help us believe in you? And Jesus' answer, be in relationship with me. And this is what Jesus invites us today, to work, to labor in this relationship with him. To live in Christ, as Paul likes to use the phrase, to be in Christ. To live in Christ is to enjoy the life of God. the kind of life that makes us really alive. And that means, when we do this, to live in Christ, that we're going to have to let go of some things that keep us from believing, from living in Christ. One of the most popular TED Talks, it's been viewed over 41 million times, is by Dr. Brené Brown, a researcher from the University of Houston, I believe, and her talk is called The Power of Vulnerability. In this talk, she offers us a piece of the truth as she speaks about living a meaningful life. She brought up many points in her 25-30-minute talk, but a few stick with me that I'll share. Being connected to others, she said, is what gives life meaning and purpose. And the way to remain connected with others is to embrace what she calls excruciating vulnerability, where one cultivates a sense of worthiness, that I am worthy of love, I am worthy of belonging. Through this vulnerability, which, by the way, is something akin to Christ on the cross, the word excruciate means from the cross. When we open up our figurative arms, as Christ literally opened his arms on the cross, we let go of whatever false beliefs we held on that we thought were true about ourselves. Some of these beliefs may have been taught to us long ago as a child. Some of us were raised imperfectly. In fact, all of us were raised imperfectly because we're human beings, our parents are human. And some of these beliefs may include the feeling that we're unlovable because of some verbal abuse, or physical, or sexual abuse. Other false notions about ourselves spring from our egos that serve to protect us as we go through this life. I'm an important person because I'm a Catholic priest. Or I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer. All these pieces we think to be true about ourselves do not capture our real truth, which is underneath all those layers of labels that we've allowed to be stuck upon us about our worth, that one has worth or doesn't have worth. As part of the crowd that seeks signs from God, from Jesus, we need to be careful to not adopt the attitude of some in the crowd who will not be able to go deeper in relationship with Jesus, but who will continually seek signs that don't penetrate. Those who don't go that deep prefer a life of certainty, a life where there's some drudgery, but at least some certainty. It's like picking up pieces of the truth and letting it become the whole truth. You know, this happens not just in religion, but in life outside of this building. I think that's what's going on in our country right now with nationalism. We human beings have a difficult time accepting that life leaves us feeling incomplete, inchoate. And so we look for substitutes for that emptiness. And that same thing does happen in our church as well. People will put all their energies and their resources into defending their version of the country or the church. We know the church is not our end, the end in our searching for meaning. It's not. We need to remember that the church is not the be-all, end-all. We need to remember that we need to keep moving in the right direction, to not stop and rest on our laurels that we have certainty of the truth. We live with tension as part of the church, part of the crowd that seeks Jesus. In today's world, we have folks inside and outside the church struggling with this uncertainty of life's journey. More than ever, there are voices in religion and politics that are trying to eliminate uncertainty with certainty. And they are very much like that fellow that picked up a piece of the truth, claiming it to be all the truth. We hear angry voices in the church that call for uniformity. That is not Catholic. That's not. Unity is Catholic. It's one of the things I love about coming to be the pastor of this church, when I discovered how we celebrate our unity with our diversity. That's Christ's body. There's a lot of voices at large in the church, voices of discontent, of anger, feeling betrayed. There's a lot of blaming today. Dr. Brene Brown says that blame is a way to discharge pain and discomfort. Franciscan Father Richard Rohr, one of my mentors in life, he says that if you cannot transcend your pain, you're bound to transmit it. Today, our readings offer us a mirror of our life, our situation we find ourselves in, the wilderness. Moses and the people that prefer Egypt, even slavery was better because they knew what was coming. Being nourished, being fed, is a metaphor for this desire to be fully alive, to have a sense of complete life. There was a wonderful movie that came out a couple of years ago called Jackie, and it was about Jackie Kennedy in the days following her husband's assassination, talking to a reporter, and there's a series of flashbacks. And one of the flashbacks has her talking to a priest early in the morning at Arlington National Cemetery. They're on their way to bury the two little children she had, to bury them with the president there. And the priest says to her, as she's pondering whether she believes in God anymore after the devastating loss of her husband, he says to her, there comes a time in man's search for meaning when one realizes there are no answers. And when you come to that horrible, unavoidable realization, you accept it or you kill yourself. Or you simply stop searching. He says, I've lived a blessed life, and yet every night when I climb into bed and turn off the lights and I stare into the dark, I wonder, is this all there is? And Jackie says to him, you wonder? And he says, every soul on this planet does. But then when morning comes, we all wake up and make a pot of coffee. And Jackie says, why do we bother? Because we do, says the priest. You did it this morning, you'll do it again tomorrow. But God, in his infinite wisdom, has made sure it's just enough for us. We have to appreciate what we have. In the life of Christ, in the Eucharist, God gives us enough to help us through this life. Here is where we're offered the ability to transcend our pains, our hurts, and the transformed bread become body, and the transformed wine become blood. Here we are fed each week by the true bread that has come down from heaven. With the one who embraced vulnerability, even to the point of excruciating pain and death, we receive the grace to also live vulnerably, knowing we don't have all the answers, but also knowing we're not alone. Staying connected through thick and thin, sometimes with masks and social distancing, with hearts and minds that believe we are worthy of love, worthy of belonging to God in Christ, we will never go hungry, we will never thirst. As the old Chinese saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We continue our journey of faith, knowing that the Lord is with us through it all.